Hello, everybody. So, if you missed the lecture, here is the makeup lecture so that you don't fall behind on the fall. And hopefully, you already finished the Ed puzzle on the myth of Sisyphus because we're going to talk about that today in a little more detail. So, I would take notes if I were you. This is going to be helping you with understanding the book and knowing how to read. So, let's look at what we're doing here. We're going to be doing excuse me, we're going to be answering like who was Camus, why did he write The Fall, why are we reading it, and how are we going to read it. So, firstly, who was Camus? Camus was an French Algerian philosopher, as I had talked about before, who was influenced by the existentialist movement. He was a fan and then became a friend of Jean Paul Sartre, and actually met him and was part of the French resistance of the Nazi invasion, along with Sartre and other people. And he was deeply affected by, of course, what was going on in that dark time. And the book that we're going to be reading takes place post World War II. And he has his own kind of philosophy called absurdism that we're going to be talking about. And why did he write The Fall? Well, that's something that we're going to be figuring out kind of through trying to figure out what he's trying to argue in the book. He definitely was writing it as part of the existentialist um, kind of core um, concern about how to live the good life, how to be happy, how to uh, not just survive but thrive. So it was a kind of practical life philosophy that he was working on. And if you remember Enduring Understanding, part of that was like to be authentic, to live your true to be your true self and to live your best life. He had a belief about how to achieve that, and we're gonna see how that plays through in reading the book. Okay, and why are we reading it? Well, we're reading it because I think it's a great book and I want to share it with everybody. And two, uh, it's a way for us to play around with our skills of looking for illusions and symbols and metaphors and all that good stuff, and theme and analyzing plot, and point of view and conflict and all those good things. But it's also to have us look into the mirror of ourselves and try to see who we are and what we want and figure out kind of one of life's big mysteries, how to live a good life. So is this the end all be all answer? Nope, but it's a possibility that we're going to play around with. Okay. So now the how we're going to read to it, we'll get to that in a little bit. So but first of all, I also want to make sure that you understand that this is not kind of proselytizing any of these philosophers. As I said with Heidegger and with Sartre, right? We're just playing with these guys' ideas. You're completely free to critique, um, criticize, question their beliefs, but we're just in a nutshell, all we want to do is just kind of learn about other people's points of view, play around with them, chew on it, and decide what we want to spit out and what we want to swallow. You could chew all of it. I mean, you could swallow all of it. You could spit all of it out. But we're just gonna try to understand one person's idea of the big life question about how to live a good life and see what we think about it. Okay. So, in any case, normally you would have done a quick write. I'm not going to make you do a quick write, of course. This is online, but from what the video that you saw in the Ed puzzle on the myth of Sisyphus, answer any of these questions from your memory as much as you can, because we want to see where you're at, and then I'm going to give you a little bit more, and you can either correct yourself or affirm that you understood it. Okay, so in the text box, please write down what you think is our absurd condition, or what is his solution to our fate? What is his fate? What is the absurd hero? Or any of your, honestly, you can even write down any of your thoughts or feelings or concerns or confusions about the myth of Sisyphus. So just, what do you think that whole thing was about? So to answer these questions, we're going to look at another video, and that's going to be about the myth of Sisyphus, but also showing how that essay that explains Camus' absurdism through a metaphor of this Greek myth of Sisyphus, who was doomed to hell. Well, the Greek hell, right? Tartarus, to push a boulder up a hill for no reason and for no point to torture him for all eternity. But Camus thought, well, it doesn't have to be torture. You can turn any hell into heaven in a way. It's all about your own mental attitude, kind of like a stoic thing, as we've been talking about before. But it's more complicated in that, and this video is going to kind of explain his theory, I think, even more clearly than the summary of his essay. And not only that, this video is going to show you how literature can express his philosophy, because a play called Waiting for Godot was deeply influenced by the myth of Sisyphus and Camus' works, and he completely used it to make his own play. And The Fall, it's not as completely the myth of Sisyphus that the Waiting for Godot is, but I thought this would be a neat way to see how his philosophy can be seen through literature, and we can see his arguments through that piece of literature as a kind of modeling of sort of what we're going to be doing with The Fall. So I take notes on this video, please. It's going to be helpful. It'll help you come up with some of the hows on your ARNs for the because we're going to be doing philosophical hows, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but make sure to take notes. So let's watch.
Waiting for Godot is one of the most famous plays of the 20th century. In it, two characters named Vladimir and Estragon pass the time on a country road as they wait for a man named Godot to arrive. The play is famously weird and mysterious and open-ended, prompting the question, what is this story about? The play massively interests me as an actor because it's brilliant and really, really fun to perform, but it also interests me as a man with a background in philosophy because it's part of the theatre of the absurd. Absurdism is a philosophical movement that wound up influencing a lot of 20th century art through a rather interesting story. Alors, bienvenue à Paris, dans l'entre-deux-guerres. C'est un temps de culture et de pensée florissante. Voilà, le célèbre philosophe Jean-Paul Sartre et Simone de Beauvoir et l'artiste Salvador Dali. Vous avez l'air en bonne forme, Sal. Et aussi, en Paris, en ce moment, le dramaturge Samuel Beckett et le philosophe Albert Camus. Samuel Beckett was an Irishman who moved to Paris in 1928 and sank into this cultural milieu that was going on. At the time, it was very fashionable for philosopher and creative artist to be fused in one person. Philosophers were writing literature and writers were writing philosophy. And then something very bad happened. Something called World War II. France is invaded by the Nazis. And so philosopher, creative artist, and resistance fighter become fused into single persons, as both Samuel Beckett and Albert Camus join the underground resistance. And this is the context in which Camus writes his most famous work, The Myth of Sisyphus, in 1942. The book asks, how should we confront the absurd? The absurd, with a capital A, is a technical term in Camus' writing. It refers to the contradiction between humanity's desire to find meaning in the universe and the universe itself, which is completely meaningless. And once you realize that life is pointless but you are compelled to find a point to it anyway, Camus says there are 7 possible responses. Number 1, you could kill yourself. Number 2, you could try to ignore it by filling your life with pleasures of food and drink and company. Number 3, you could just deny it. For instance, you could be religious and say, no, there is meaning in life because the meaning comes from God. Or you could be an existentialist and say that maybe you don't go in for organized religion so much, but in some sense you create your own meaning in life. Camus saw both of those as forms of denial. He says you're still not really looking life in the face because ultimately the universe is meaningless. That's why he didn't like to be called an existentialist, although his work does have some themes in common with that. The fourth way of confronting the absurd is to become an actor and try to live lives that pretend to have meaning within the context of stories. The fifth is to become another kind of artist, like a painter, somebody who creates works of art that have meanings as a substitute for living a life with a meaning. And the sixth is to become a political person, like a conqueror, somebody for whom power and government and the right way to use those things fills up their time and gives them meaning. All of these methods Camus considers and ultimately rejects. But the seventh and final method of confronting the absurd, the one that he actually recommends, is acceptance. Accepting that life is pointless, but that you are compelled to find a point to it anyway. But this acceptance isn't a kind of sad, passive, depressing acceptance. Camus thought it was an act of resistance against the universe itself. You look life square in the face. You don't deny it, you don't distract yourself, and you don't give in. And you live life anyway in full knowledge of its pointlessness. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus was doomed to roll a boulder up a mountain every day and then watch it roll back down again every night forever. And Camus says the only way Sisyphus can really be happy is if he accepts the pointlessness of that task, and he decides to own it and go down the mountain every night, smiling. You can see how living in Nazi-occupied France informed a lot of these ideas. This feeling of fighting what looked like an unwinnable battle against uncaring forces indulging in pointless, inhuman destruction was a feeling that Camus was very familiar with day to day. The final line of the book is, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." And then we come to 1953 and the premiere performance of Waiting for Godot. À l'époque, c'était en français, En attendant Godot. The English translation came 2 years later. In it, Vladimir and Estragon are engaged in what seems to be a never-ending, pointless, and often repetitive task, waiting for Godot. Waiting for Godot is the whole reason that they are there, and yet he never turns up. So their situation is rather like someone else's we've just met. The play is about what people do when confronted with the absurd, with the compulsion to find meaning where no meaning exists. And throughout the play, the characters try all of the methods of confronting the absurd that Camus suggests. They talk about killing themselves, but they don't. They talk about attempting some sexual pleasure or becoming more physically comfortable with food or with their shoes. Vladimir considers some religious ideas at various points, but they don't really seem to satisfy him. All of the characters are, of course, metatextually played by actors, and so they are examining that way of confronting it too. Vladimir tries singing at one point, and various popular interpretations of the play present the two as being rather like a music hall double act generally. One of the other characters, Pozzo, has a slave called Lucky. Having that power over him seems to be what gives his life a lot of meaning, or at least structure, but we see by Act 2 that it hasn't really made him better off. By the end of the play, Didi and Gogo seem doomed to wait for Godot forever. They don't seem to be able to accept the fact that if he exists at all, he's not coming. Interestingly, there is one character in the play who I think maybe does accept the absurd. They are charged with carrying a heavy burden, but when offered comfort and distraction, willingly go back to that burden and pick it up again. It's Lucky, the so-called slave. I think, at this particular stage of my artistic career, and I reserve the right to change my mind later, but I think that you could read Lucky as being Camus' model of the absurdist hero. Somebody who knows that their life is a pointless, horrible chore, but who gets on with it anyway. And when Lucky finally speaks to Vladimir, Estragon and Pozzo, they, and the audience, are incapable of understanding a word he's saying. You see what I mean? Waiting for Godot is just the staged version of the myth of Sisyphus. It's a work of philosophy presented as a play. Now, of course, If you're an actor, none of that tells you how you should play the roles. There's a big difference between delivering a lecture on symbolism in Beckett and, actually getting up and making somebody feel something. But if you're going to go and see Waiting for Godot as an audience member, which you should, then I hope that this helps you understand it a little better. Patreon. Waiting for Godot is one of the most famous plays of the.
Okay, let me try to go to the next slide. Frustrating. Okay, there we go. Anyway, so hopefully that helped you kind of more completely understand Camus' Mythosisyphus essay that you guys watched a Edpuzzle on before. Now, all those 7 steps, all of those could be one a how for what's going on in the story as part of like conflict and philosophical themes, right? Like denial, that's a big one, or and acceptance, or distraction. Do you think there might be a little bit of talking about suicide in the book? Yep, yep. Or hinting at it or thinking about it. Yep, all those things are going to be in there. The distraction thing, heck yes, it's in chapter 1. Big clue. So look out for distraction in chapter 1 and about things that's going on in there that's a kind of distraction from facing that what Camus thinks is the truth. Um, and you know, and you're gonna it's gonna talk about acting, about a play actor that's gonna come up in it. A kind of art is gonna come up in the story. There's gonna be even a piece of art. But he's gonna be talking about the main character, Jean Baptiste Clemence, is going to be talking about how he's a kind of artist in a sense. Excuse me. So all those things are going to be in there. Absolutely. So definitely make sure that you wrote those 7 things down because those could be some of your hows that are connected to either theme or conflict. All right. So how do people try to deny what Camus sees as truth about the human condition? Another way to kind of think about it is in 3 stages. There's the quitting, right? Which is the suicide number 1. Like, just, you know what? I can't handle it. I'm out. But remember, Camus thinks that is not the right answer. That is just running away. Okay? He's definitely against suicide. He's just saying, he's not saying should. He's saying you could, and people do. But he's saying that's a no-no. Um, then the pretending is all that stuff from step 2 to step 6, right? The being in denial, which could include distraction, letting you be in a state of denial, and all those other steps of denial. But the one that he wants you to do is to revolt. Camus thought the most rebellious thing that a person can do in this modern world, especially if you come to realize what he thinks is the truth about this sad paradox of there being no inherent meaning in the universe, and yet we as human beings cannot help but not just crave it, but we can't stop ourselves from looking for it, finding it, seeing it, right? So, but he thought the most rebellious thing you could do is be happy anyway, facing that paradoxical situation that we are all in, according to him, right? So revolt or to rebel is to be happy, to choose to be happy anyway. So that's what it means at the end of the essay when it says one must imagine Sisyphus happy. As the absurdist hero, it might look like a hell, but he beats the gods. The gods condemned him to a punishment of utter torture of doing something that has no meaning for eternity, which can be seen as a metaphor for us. We just go through these hamster wheels of day to day repetition that seems to be going nowhere and have no meaning, maybe. But you can be happy anyway. We all have our hamster wheels in life, but it's up to you to say, you know what? I'm in this hamster wheel. I can't help it that I'm in this hamster wheel, but I'm gonna choose to be happy and love this hamster wheel anyway, even if I know I'm not going anywhere with it. All right. So so the absurdist hero, that is, the person who revolts, okay, who rebels and chooses to have a happy life, to live a good life, and in an honest way, not in any of those distractions, which is a fake happy, right? It's a pretend happy, right? That's why it's called pretending, right? It's not a true happiness. So for him, Anyone can be an absurdist hero if they are authentically honest with themselves, know the situation, and choose to be happy anyway and live life to the fullest for themselves. Okay. So, and how might this connect with Sartre's bad faith, though? Just try in the text box. How might we connect Camus' whole argument here about all the distractions and denials? How could that be similar to Sartre's bad faith, or what he called mauvaise foi? Try to remember that video with all the yellow background. You can look at your notes. So, how is it like Sartre's bad faith? It's both denial, right? For Sartre, being in bad faith is denying the truth that you are utterly free to live however you want to live, that you are not a victim of the universe, that you can question what you think you have to do, you can live a different way. You do not have to do or be anything other than what you choose to be. And even trying to avoid choosing is still choosing. You're choosing to not choose, right? But the only way to live a happy life for Sartre is to not live in bad faith, to be honest and go, okay, I'm making this choice. It's my choice. I'm not living somebody else's choice. I'm going to be a subject in my life, not an object, right? So bad faith is to is keeps you from being authentic, right? So um, all that stuff, steps 1 through 6, is a way of living in bad faith, living inauthentically. So it's pretty much the same answer, just a little bit differently explained. Okay. So bad faith means being in denial, just like the denial of all those stages that Camus says people are in denial. And to live an authentic life, you can't do that stuff. You got to be honest, and it is scary to be honest. Both of them recognize that, but you got to push through it if you want to live a happy life, a truly good life. That's what they think anyway. And his Camus has influenced not just other, existentialist writers like the Irish Nobel laureate that wrote Waiting for Godot, Samuel Beckett, but tons of stuff. There's a whole genre of plays called the theater of the absurd that was talked about in Waiting for Godot. One of my favorite plays is called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and it's so funny, but also has deep, important themes about life, death, identity, time, all those things that's playing on Hamlet, and it's wonderful. But this comic book, Calvin and Hobbes, the guy that wrote Calvin and Hobbes, also was influenced by existentialism and absurdism. And here's the perfect absurdist hero of Calvin and Hobbes being absurdist hero. Look, what are they doing? They're having fun, but they're still questioning. And it says, we all want meaningful lives. We look for meaning in everything we do, right? That's our absurd condition in the universe. But suppose there is no meaning. Suppose life is fundamentally absurd. That's exactly Camus' point. He's saying, yep, that's the problem, right? And look, they're choosing to be happy anyway, having a good old time, going down that hill in the wagon, right? So let's definitely take some notes on this now. I'm going to give you some hints about things to be looking out for as we read the book. Okay. Um, some themes and motifs. I bet you can guess one. What do you see here in the picture that someone drew of Camus? It's so perfect for the fall. What do you see here? Do you see two faces? What does that mean to be two-faced? Mm-hmm. It means to be false. To put on a mask, right? So there's the real you and the fake you, right? Right, but that's inauthentic. And there's definitely stuff about being two-faced in this. But like our questions we had at the beginning of this unit, since we came back from Christmas break, judgment. That's a big theme. Look for um, things that he's saying and doing and regarding the theme of judgment, not just of others, but of the self. Okay. I'm not going to show you what this means yet, but I want when it comes up in the book, pay attention. It's very important. The judge penitent. If you don't know what the word penitent means, look it up. That's important. Judge penitent. If you are, um, if you are religiously practicing Catholic, you might know about confession, and you might know a word related to that. Hmm. So anyway, look it up. See if you can figure out what it is. It's a. We'll get there when we get there, but definitely write that down. Authenticity and inauthenticity. That's a huge theme that you want to be looking out for. It's kind of the whole point of the book. Is how does one live an authentic, good life? Okay, and what are the repercussions of living an inauthentic, dishonest life? How does that? How can that hurt a person and everyone around them? And regret, right, which follows from being inauthentic, right? And that kind of negative self judgment. So these are huge themes. There are others too, but this is definitely some big, big stuff. Okay. You also want to look out for some major illusions. Look at the title itself. What could that maybe be an allusion to? Think about Lord of the Flies. What was one of the big illusion references? The Bible, anyone? Anybody know about the fall of man? Right? Adam and Eve, the fall of man in the book of Genesis. If you don't, that's okay. Someone will bring it up and we will learn together about it. But there's going to be a lot of biblical allusions here. The title already has it. He'll be bringing up other things too. Dante's Inferno, right? We learned all about that for a reason. The whole book. There's a couple moments where he does mention it, at least one moment he completely mentions Dante's Inferno, but the whole book is Dante's Inferno in a way. Okay, it's everywhere. Okay, so look out for that. Just like not exactly like Over the Garden Wall, but very similar. There's historical allusions too. Definitely World War II stuff, but even earlier things that you might pick up on, especially if you're taking AP or O or honors history. I don't know if you guys talked about the Dutch at all, or about the slave trade, and that might some of those things might stick out to you. If not, when we get there, somebody will probably say something, and we'll teach each other about it. Um, the setting also is very important. There's symbolic settings. There's two settings: Amsterdam and Paris. Whenever you're in Amsterdam, it is the present day. Whenever he starts talking about his life in the past, the main character, it's in Paris. Okay, so those two places are important. Um, and it's not just the two places, but other things about the setting are going to be important thematically, symbolically. There's going to be a bunch of details there in the setting. Pay attention to that. Okay. The point of view is also unusual in this book. It could be argued it's first person. It can also be argued that it's second person. First person means someone keeps saying I, and he definitely is talking right through dialogue to you, at you. But maybe right if there's either one character or there's two. We'll debate it. If there's two characters, it's second person, and he's talking to you and you're the second character. So he's addressing you and talking to you, which he does. He does talk to some not speaking person. So it's generally interpreted as second person. He's talking to you. Okay. And the protagonist's name is Jean Baptiste Clemence. That's a very symbolic name. I would look for symbolism all over the place too. Of course, it's loaded with symbols. But the clemency, clemence. Look up what that word means. Jean Baptiste. Does that sound familiar to anybody? John the Baptist. If you don't know anything about John the Baptist, you might want to look him up. Okay, but if you do, hey, there you go. So he's even the character's name is a biblical allusion. Okay, and of course he's going to have lots of irony. That's another thing to look out for here is as a character. Okay, not only is he maybe an absurd hero and maybe a pastiche of sort, but he's deeply ironic, and you can't trust him. He's an unreliable narrator. I know it doesn't type it here, but dude, he is. Okay, all first person / anybody who's telling you their life story, it's going to be unreliable. Even if they think they're being honest, they're unreliable because they have limited point of view about the events, the facts of what's going on. Um, we all try to protect ourselves, save face, try to minimize the bad stuff about ourselves or exaggerate the good stuff so that people don't judge us badly. Or sometimes we do the opposite, like we have a warped sense of self, right? A kind of dysphoria, right? Well, we think that we're not as good as we actually are. So it's very hard to be an honest judge of yourself. So, or he might be crazy, right? You'll see. So he is deeply unreliable, and he'll even tell you, "Don't trust me." So question everything. All right, take everything with a grain of salt. Um, he's an unreliable narrator for sure. So look out for that too. Okay. So getting back to the illusions of Dante's Inferno, the story takes place. There's only two characters, as I said. There's Jean Baptiste Clemence, who's our Virgil, right? Our guide through the underworld. And then who's Dante? You. Okay. He is taking you on a tour. He's going to be walking you around Amsterdam, telling you stories, showing you stuff as you walk around the canals of uh, of Amsterdam. And speaking of Amsterdam, do you remember the concentric circles of hell? It kind of starts off with you cross over and it's the limbo, and then after you pass the main gates to come in, and then it gets the worse and worse sins according to Dante as you go down. What was the center, bottom sin? It was betrayal. And guess what? The book starts off and you meet him. This is an overview of Amsterdam at night, right here in the center, at a bar called Mexico City. Why Mexico City? You're going to have to wait and see. So, again, you want to look up symbolism of settings. Um, so, we'll see if you guys pick that up on that one. And if you don't, I'll help you later. But try to see what you see. But anyway, you're going to meet him at the dead center. So, what does that maybe imply? Why are you both there? Who did you betray? Who did he betray? How did you betray them? What kind of betrayal? So it starts off there, and then you're gonna meet him in a bar, and you're gonna be having a drink with him, and he's gonna talk your ear off, and they're gonna go outside where it's raining and foggy, and you're gonna agree to meet up over a course of 6 days. 6 days. That's interesting. What else happened in 6 days? Huh. In any case, um, you're going to be going over these canals. So, do you see how it looks like Dante's Inferno's idea of hell? Isn't that hilarious? Um, I think it's great. And if you see these dark parts, those are not streets; those are canals of water. So they're kind of like the rivers of hell, right? Like Styx and Acheron and all that stuff, right? Or Acheron, depends on who you're talking to. Um, so and look at that. And then there's all these little bridges. Ooh, bridges are deeply symbolic. Okay. So um, that's kind of like a big hint of how you are in Dante's Inferno the whole time, right? And definitely look out for things about judgment and definitely about betrayal. But, there could be other layers in there that you notice too from Dante's Inferno, like we practice with Over the Garden Wall. But betrayal's the big one for sure. Okay. And here's what Amsterdam looks like when you're on the streets. So this right here is a bridge. You can't really see it right here, but there's water with little houseboats. And all the homes are like these kind of tight, tall row homes with many, like 5 stories or so. Quite beautiful. When it's in the winter and fall, it's very foggy, right? So here's one where you can see the canals and the boats. And people ride bicycles all over Amsterdam. There's not a lot of cars. There's some, but most people are getting around town on bicycles. Okay. So the fog, could that be symbolic of something? What about riding bicycles in circles? What could that be? I don't know. Okay, here's another street. You kind of see what it looks like. So you're going to be walking up and down streets like this, getting chatted at by Monsieur Jean Baptiste Clemence, who's going to be telling you about his past life, confessing to you about some things that he's done. Okay. Now, there's also the rivers and bridges in Paris, right? This is the River Seine, and there's a famous bridge that's really important in the book. Then a very important event happens. So when you see bridges, pay attention big time. You should pay attention to everything, but really low. What's going on with these bridges? Okay. And so you can kind of see the map of like the big points that he's talking about. Okay. The bridge that the big event happens is right here. Okay, where it's the Pont Saint Michel. And there's a park with the Vert Galant, which is a just means like the Green Knight, the green. It's green because it's like bronze and it's greened over, but he's going to be mentioning something that happens there, and I think he's staying at this hotel area, like he's living in an apartment hotel kind of thing here. All right. So he'll be bringing up this area. So he's kind of right in the center of Paris. And if you've been to Paris, this is where most tourists even kind of go, is this area. Like, in fact, see it here, right here. It says bookstore at the bottom corner, bookstore, Shakespeare and Company. Been there. I bought books there. Guess who hung out there? Monsieur Jean Paul Sartre, Monsieur Camus, Ernest Hemingway, um, also the guy that wrote Waiting for Godot was there, Samuel Beckett, and I'll try to remember to bring my books I bought from there that has a stamp on it, and it's an English language bookstore. But anyway, this is the Ile de la Cité, and it's super famous. Um, it's got. I'm pretty sure this is where where Notre Dame is, and this is the famous Seine. And you're really close to like really famous places, and the Louvre is kind of just south, south. If you kept going on the map on the bottom right corner, if you kept going, you'd be right near the Louvre. So it's very like city center of Paris. And he's going to tell you about his life there. And here's kind of a screenshot. Not screenshot. A satellite of the same area. You kind of see it. All right. Ooh, Eugene Delacroix has a major painter. So there's lots of, and that's the University of the City of Paris. That's the National Superior School of Art. They just gonna say Beaux Arts, which is fine arts, right? Oh, and that's the Palace of Exposition of Art right there. So yeah, cool stuff. And then here's kind of the bridge that the big event happens in Paris. These are lovers locks. They're supposed to be like a kind of we're going to be together forever. This is no longer there, but I think that I'm not sure if that was a thing when he was there. They've all been cut off because that made the bridge so heavy it was not safe. All that extra metal just was it was gonna people were gonna get hurt. But that's the area, and you can kind of see. I think that might be the Louvre right there. Um, might be. Without the pyramid, it's hard for me to remember. Though a lot of the buildings look like this on the Seine. Now, there's a major illusion coming that I'm going to make you watch a couple of very small Ed puzzles on from Khan Academy videos about it. This is what's called a polyptych. It is a panel of many paintings. It is an altarpiece. This is when you see it closed. You can see here, here's an angel who's telling the Virgin Mary, you're going to have a baby, right? So there's the dove there. These are the people that paid for the painting on the bottom, left and right in red. I'm pretty sure that's John the Baptist and Mary as statues on the bottom. I can't really see who's on top. I don't recall. It might be other patrons of the art, but this is when it's closed, and they do come apart in pieces. It's very big. And when you open it up, it looks like this. You've got Adam and you've got Eve on the far ends, right? You've got Mary, John the Baptist. How interesting. Jesus, you've got choir of angels playing music. And then down here, this is another name for this is called the Adoration of the Lamb. It's all these people on earth going to go see Jesus, which is the Lamb of God. And so that there's literally a lamb right there. And there's a very interesting history about this. And this is going to be in the story brought up. I wouldn't even say an illusion. It's a, it's in the story. Okay. Particularly this piece on the bottom left. The panel here with the men on the horses in the bottom left, that panel is called the Just Judges. Remember when we talked about, is there such a thing as just judgment? And fun fact, this thing has been stolen and recovered a couple of times. The Nazis took it, and when it was found, and with a bunch of other art pieces, this panel is missing. We don't know where it is to this day. It has been missing since World War II era. Okay, and so what the cathedral in Ghent did to kind of make it complete, they hired an expert to paint a fake. Everybody knows it's fake, and he's a very good artist. He's able to make it look exactly the same, but it's fake. What could that mean? Very interesting. So we'll see what when we see it. Okay, but that painting is there. We'll look out for it. It's coming. He's going to be talking about this, and something's going to be going on symbolically with this painting. So when we get closer, this isn't. It really becomes a big part in the end of the book. So when we get closer to the end of the book, I'll have you guys do the ed puzzles on that. They're short, nice little just explanations of it. So that's about it, you guys. Other than I just need to show you how to write your ARNs. Oh yeah, we already talked about this, right? Is that is Clemence Sartre, or at least like a pastiche, kind of sort of based on him? Of course, not exactly. In the book, he says he's a lawyer. Sartre was never a lawyer. In the book, he's like uh, more dapper, you know. Um, so he's not exactly Sartre, but there's a lot about him that personality wise, maybe let's say. So that's a question: is he kind of based off of at least the ideas of Sartre, if that makes sense? Um, but what we're going to do, so now we're at the last question: how are we going to read it? Just like we did for Lord of the Flies, you're going to be writing errands, except we're not going to be doing one of those uh, critical lenses that were like, that you got to pick. You're going to specifically be looking through a philosophical lens, though you can also look up any of the other kinds of things like symbolism, metaphors, point of view, conflict. All that stuff we've learned you're allowed to use here, but you want some of them at least to be about existential philosophy or absurdism. Okay. So there's only 6 chapters in this, or 6 days. Okay. Each chapter is a day that you hang out with him. All right. And for each day, we're going to read one at a time. You're going to find 3 good quotes that you think help us see something about the theme of authenticity, right? Which might include examples of inauthenticity, of course, or judgment, existentialism, right? I gave you all a big list of all the Sartrean concepts. You've got stuff from Camus from this lecture, right? The 7 ways you can um, face the absurd, right? You could talk about the absurdism stuff too. If you see any of those 7 steps in there anywhere, um, all the stuff I had the list in this slideshow I talked about, right? You can bring up as your hows, okay? And like the other errands in the past, not only do you need to ask a question, but you need to put in your insights. You need to like try to answer those questions that you have as what you think it could be, even if you're confused, right? You got to try. Put what are you seeing in this quote, and what questions do you still have about it, and what are your thoughts about possible answers, just like before, right? And I want you to define 3 terms per chapter to get full points. This book is a higher reading level than Lord of the Flies, so there's going to be words you don't know. And I'm going to show you an example in the ARN that I did. So here's an example from the very first chapter on pages 13, 14, where you're already outside of the bar, and Jean Baptiste is talking to you. Although I don't even think you know his name yet. I'm not sure he tells you till chapter 2, but I told you, so you know. Um, and he's just kind of commenting, he, saying something like he's being judgy of the Dutch, and he says, and mind you, it was the Netherlands was called Holland at the time, so now it's called the Netherlands, but it was Holland then. And he said, here's the quote I picked: "Holland is a dream, monsieur." Hopefully, you know monsieur means sir. "A dream of gold and smoke." And I cut some words out. "That dream is peopled with Lohengrins." And I cut some out. "Dreamily riding their black bicycles. Funeral swans constantly drifting through the whole land. They cycle in circles. They pray. Somnambulists in the fog's gilded incense. They have ceased to be here." So that word somnambulists, see that? I bet your bottom dollar most people don't know what that means. And if you look at word parts, you might be able to figure it out. Do you know any words that have somn in it, like with an N? Somn, insomnia. Somnus is the Greek word for sleep. So insomnia means the inability to sleep, right? Because in is a prefix meaning, like unable or not. So has something to do with sleep, right? And then ambule, like an ambulance or ambulatory. Ambulatory means moving around, walking. Ambulating is walking. So sleepwalkers. It's just a fancy word for sleepwalkers. So again, they pray, sleepwalkers in the fog, fog's gilded incense. They have ceased to be here. So there's a ton in here. I could have brought up diction, symbolism, imagery, but I mean, I could go on and on. There's so much in these quotes. You're going to find that with this book, it's really dense that you could just analyze and analyze and analyze. But I just picked the themes. I put bad faith, inauthentic denial, right? Because I saw this as symbolism of the sleepwalkers, of like living inauthentically, being in denial, living a life of bad faith. So here's my why. I put, and remember, you can ask questions that have loaded answers in them, right? So it says here, is Camus saying the Dutch are mostly living inauthentically, just dreaming in a sleepwalk, but not living, like exists? Are they in a living hell of their own creation? Or like are they just existing, right? A life of monotony, remember, like Sisyphus, right? And a hamster wheel, like in the video This Is Water. That will make sense when I show you the video this week, which is another example of showing you Camus' philosophy in another way. Sisyphean cycles around quote unquote hell, or in bad faith denial. Because the reason why I bring up golden smoke and fog's gilded incense is because remember what Sartre said about bad faith, about how money he thought was one of the main contributing factors to people living an inauthentic life, settling and not living how they really want to live, right? He thought money was a ticket to bad faith. So if they're focused on gold and gilded means like covered in gold, right? So money, is that a reference to money? So I could have said symbolism or, money, right? But I was looking at it through the bad faith lens. And then smoke, right? Fog and smoke to me kind of shows a kind of like you can't really see clearly. They're not thinking clearly. They're not being honest. They're kind of in a daisy dream. They're not what Heidegger would call awake. That remember das Sein, like that epiphany of realizing you're alive. If you're sleeping, it's almost like they're half dead, right? So are they kind of just zombies, not really living an authentic life, right? Is he trying to use the Dutch as a metaphor for living inauthentically? So that's what I saw, right? That might seem like a lot, but you'll get there. Okay. So that's what I saw. You're going to see what you see. And I can't wait to hear what you saw and the questions you have in the book. So for Thursday, Socratic Seminar, you need to have, before you walk in that door, uploaded the pictures of your ARNs so they're time stamped and I can give you feedback. Make sure the pictures are good and I can read them and I can give you accurate feedback. If I can't read them, I can't give you points and I can't give you feedback because I want to really give you lots of feedback over the next weekend before you finish your second batch of ARNs. Okay, and our correct seminar just on chapter one, or our first day hanging out with Monsieur Clemence, um, will be this coming Thursday. Okay, so I hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend, or if it's Monday that you're watching this, the rest of your evening, and I will see you when I see you on Monday. All right. Bye bye.